Huelsbeck. I'm a composer, mainly for video games, and I'm originally from Germany. Now I'm in the US for about 12 years, and yeah, I love my job. My musical background is basically my family was all into music. My grandma, my mom, my aunt, they were all piano teachers, so we always had instruments in the house. And I think I started like hammering on the piano when I was only 4 years old. And then they tried to teach me in my early years, and I didn't have that much interest in like learning how to play other people's music. I wanted to compose my own melodies, and so I quit after about 2 years piano studies. And from that point on, I taught music myself, and yeah, it evolved over time. No, I actually never went to a conservatory or something like that, but I studied a lot of like books, especially about orchestration, since so many music in the games industry is now done with real orchestras. So you know, I know all the instruments of the orchestra, and I can put together a pretty decent score. And then usually at the end I give it to somebody who has studied it, and they refine it and make it perfect for the orchestra to play. Yeah, I mean, my main instrument is obviously keyboards or piano, but I would really like to learn to play electric guitar. But it takes a lot of practice, and I try it a couple times, but I never get very far with it. 2008, a friend of mine in Germany, he was a big fan of my music, and he also put together concerts for orchestras. And so he put together one concert just for my music with a big radio symphony orchestra over there. And that was just mind-blowing, amazing. So yeah, I mean, as I said, I started playing on the piano my own melodies. Later I became interested in electronic music. I listened to a lot of bands like Tangerine Dream and Jean-Michel Jarre, Kraftwerk, all those early electronic artists, and I wanted to do something like that. But I could never afford like all this music electronics that they had, especially as a teenager. So one day I read that the classic Commodore 64 computer had a real synthesizer sound chip, and so I had to have one, and I saved up money, and my grandma, she gave me a little bit more money, and finally I could buy the Commodore 64, and I started programming my own music with it, and that at some point became my career. There was a lot of actually real deep machine language programming, and you had to put in endless hours of editing hexadecimal numbers and stuff like that. So it was really tedious. Just to get like a little melody or song together was unbelievable. Well, nowadays it's a total different story. I mean, music for games these days is produced like any other music. It's like in a studio, or you even have like real orchestras playing the music, and then after the music is recorded, you chop it up again and try to implement it in the game into, was a way to, have it interact with the game, so that when the player goes in a different direction, the music can change and stuff like that. So it's definitely changed a lot. Since video games are visual media, it's, I think, similar to what you would do for film scoring. So you basically look at what the game will display, what the mood is, what the style could be of music that could fit for this kind of genre. And then usually in the early days you have concept art or like early graphics that are displayed, or even like an early level that you can play, and then you just get like an idea of what kind of music could fit here. And then I would just sit down with a simple piano sound or something like that and try out some melodies and some harmonies. And I do record everything that even if I just jam on the piano, my sequencer program is always running in the background and recording. So I keep everything that I ever play on the keyboard is recorded. So I can go back and then listen to it again and say, oh, this section is really cool, that could really fit for this game. And then you take that part and then you develop it with all the other instruments. If it's like an orchestral score, then you add like strings, brass instruments, woodwinds, and all these instruments, and that creates the score. I think right now I'm a big fan of Jesper Kid. He's the composer of the Assassin's Creed series, and he just has a very interesting way of combining electronic music with orchestral instruments. So it's always very intriguing what he does, and he has a very good sense of melody and harmonies. Halo was very big. Marty O'Donnell, I think he kind of changed the industry, or how game music is perceived when Halo came out first. And then there's a few more. My early influences were probably more Japanese arcade music. I always liked that. Music will really just evolve the way maybe film music has evolved over time. It just matures more, and the sound, in the early days it was all very abstract, and if you would play one of those Commodore 64 tunes to somebody today that didn't grow up with that, they would probably say, "Eee, what is that?" And now it's probably comparable or surpassing like film music. So it's very accessible now, I think. And there's soundtracks coming out and stuff like that. So I think the only thing is probably in the future there will be even more focus on live performances that are recorded. There's always something about live players playing the music instead of trying to emulate it with electronics. That always adds to the quality, I think. When I was approached for Star Trek Infinite Space, I was really ecstatic because I'm a big fan of Star Trek, and I admire all the different scores that have been done. And so yeah, I was just excited and I started working, and in the beginning it was a little bit tricky because we tried to kind of update the old motifs and play with that a little bit, and it didn't quite work. It was fun to do, but actually at some point we started over, and it's now a very modern way of scoring. I think it's all orchestral instruments and very little electronic influences. So it sounds classic orchestra, but it's also a modern sound from the compositions. So I think it should very well complement the franchise. I listen to a lot of film scores, obviously. I just love that soundtrack for Tron. That was just amazing. And I still listen to pop music, but probably more with an electronic, going more into the electronic era part. And one of my favorite bands there is a British band called Hybrid. I think in the internet you find them on a Hybrid sound system. And they also combine electronics with orchestral sounds, which is something that I really like. I am a gamer, but I don't have as much time anymore as in my earlier days. I mean, I played through all the Mario Brothers, and I think the last really big game that I played was Half-Life 2. But I do check out everything that comes out, you know. And mostly these days I check out games on YouTube because I don't have the time to sit there for a week or two to play it. So I just, you know, watch how other people play it, and I get an idea about that. Like Uncharted 2 was also an amazing soundtrack, and I really enjoyed watching those videos of the playthrough. And I have an iPhone, so I play a lot of little casual games in between. And I've actually done some iPhone games in the last year. There was Zombie Smash was one of the iPhone games that I scored, and another one was called Kubrick. And then there was one called Subsolar. And I also wrote a new title track for R-Type for the iPhone. Yeah, so my biggest influences musically are the early electronic artists like Jean-Michel Jarre and Tangerine Dream. And then from the film music side, obviously John Williams, huge fan. And Jerry Goldsmith, Hans Zimmer, Alain Silvestri, those are my heroes for movie scores. So Star Trek's already announced, so I can talk about that. I have another project running that I can't talk about yet, but it's also a very interesting one. I hope I can talk about that soon. And I'm still working on some iPhone projects. There's a new version of Zombie Smash coming out with another track, and so that continues. And I have some other things that are still a little bit out there, but they will be announced soon. Tips for aspiring musicians is always a big topic. I get a lot of emails, and people ask me, how can I get started? And it's definitely not as easy anymore as when I started out. I was lucky. There were only a handful of people in the late 80s that were doing this kind of stuff, and I was just in the right place at the right time. I think nowadays it's really, you probably should have talent. I mean, that's a given. But it's equally important that you are tenacious and you really, that you want this. And you have to work on this probably for a long time before a meaningful project really comes along. And so I think the most important part is networking, because from my experience, what I hear from other people in the industry, it's all about personal relationships. So you can't like just send a demo somewhere and expect that somebody jumps on it. And I mean, it would have to be extraordinarily exceptional material to really work that way. I think you have to really befriend people who make the games, and you know, go with them for lunch or dinner or whatever, and socialize, network, and maybe help out somebody else who's already established, just to get your credit maybe in a game or a few, and just keep doing it. And you have to really want it. That's, I think, the most important thing.